Hello everyone, this is Daohe. Welcome back to the show. Last time we introduced the idea of complete citizenship, and today I want to take that idea a step further and talk about what actually shapes a complete citizen and how we can begin to cultivate these people in a world that is changing faster than any generation before us. Now you might be wondering, isn't a citizen just a citizen? You vote, you pay for the taxes, maybe you join a community project once in a while. But let's be honest, most of us live in a world where being a citizen is more like being a passenger on someone else's vehicle. You watch the news, you comment on social media, and you hope the right people will make the right decision. That's about it. You are part of the system, but you are not shaping it. The complete citizen is very different. It is someone who doesn't just live inside the system, but understands it, questions it, and works to improve it. A complete citizen considers their own well-being deeply tied to the health of the public world around them. It is like a gardener. You don't just enjoy the flowers, you also tend the soil, water the plants, and pull out the weeds. Without their care, even the most beautiful flowers cannot thrive. A complete citizen understands that private life and public life are never really separate. They think for themselves, they can reason through moral choices, and they carry a sense of direction beyond the moment. They know their actions shape the world around them, and the health of the society feeds back into their own well-being. They are fully developed human beings, not just workers, consumers, or occasional voters, but creators and caretakers of the society where they live in. The shift is subtle but revolutionary. Imagine if more people thought in this way, not just about their career, their comfort, their security, but also the world they are helping to shape. What would happen? All the things like class structures, power hierarchy would start to dissolve. Even the idea of what makes someone valuable would start to look very different. And that, in essence, is why the complete citizenship is the ultimate product of civic awareness. They are not an abstract ideal. They are the people who can make the world more just, sustainable, and vibrant. And the good news, every one of us has the potential to become one. A complete citizen isn't a title granted by law. It is more like a quiet state of mind, a maturity of thought and spirit. And you might wonder, how does that embody in real life? It is the ability to judge information critically. They may ask, is it true? Who would benefit from me believing this? It is not blind acceptance, but critical judgment. It is also the capacity to understand why our shared rules exist, and to follow them not out of fear, but out of integrity. And then the willingness to take responsibility for their actions, whether it's right or wrong. And maybe most importantly, it is the strength to hold on to their dignity and speak up for themselves when needed, while still treating others with respect. A complete citizen doesn't simply drift along the tides of society. To them, power is not some distant castle to overthrow, or a prize reserved for the few. It is something out in the open, a public tool. It is meant to be examined, questioned, understood, and used with responsibility. They know that power shapes the lives of others, so it must be handled with clarity and conscience, not impulse or ambition. Their choices are not forced by fear, habit, or blind obedience, but guided by reason, conscience, and the courage to act freely. In living this way, they don't merely exist or consume what is already there. They leave traces of wisdom, purpose that others can follow. Sounds simple, right? But raising a complete citizen is more like cultivating a very sensitive, delicate plant. It needs both the climate and the soil. For every child, the soil is the family and school, and the climate is the broader social atmosphere. An environment grounded in freedom, respect, fairness, and inclusion is essential for a child to grow into a complete citizen. But why are complete citizens still so rare? This is because the conditions, both the soil and the climate, are often missing in our society. Let's start with social climate. One thing a child picks up during their growth is the meta-narrative of a society. It is the big, invisible story that tells them what matters. It is more profound than any textbook. These are the dominant values of our society that tells them what is best to pursue and, just as importantly, what's best to avoid. Think about something as simple as asking a question. In a society that actually values intellectual freedom, kids are encouraged to explore, to wonder, to ask questions. They might ask, why is this rule like this? And someone actually listens to them. While in some other societies where obedience and discipline are the social norms, people learn to only find the answers inside the box and seldom questions the box itself, let alone break the box. Look at what a different mindset can do. People often talk about Silicon Valley's creativity as it comes out of nowhere, but it grows from an early habit, trying things that might not work. Take Steve Wozniak as an example. When he was a kid, he used to rewire old radios just to see if he could make them do something strange. Most of those experiments failed, and his parents probably wondered why the house kept losing power. But that habit, pushing past what a machine was supposed to do, later became the way he built the first Apple computer. The point is not that every child who breaks things apart is destined for greatness. It is the mindset that grows from this kind of freedom. When a child is allowed to question the instructions, break something open just to see how it works, and rebuild it in their own way, they learn to treat the world as something malleable rather than fixed. Now compare that with systems built on strict rules and hierarchy. They produce people who excel at solving well-defined problems. They memorize, follow instructions, and perform brilliantly on tests. But when faced with uncertainty, with problems that have no clear solution, they hesitate. Research reviewing multiple studies in Europe has shown that standardized testing often fails to support the development of critical thinking, creativity, and individuality. Traditional education systems often emphasize memorable knowledge and basic skills, leaving students' creativity and personal potential untapped. Over time, such a system tends to reward conformity over curiosity. And then there is the question of role model. What we see in the spotlight shapes how we think about success. Right now, a huge chunk of news is taken up by celebrity gossip. About 40% of people say there is way too much of it. Meanwhile, the scientists, innovators, and people who work to improve the world barely gets noticed. Among scientists, 83% said television news coverage of science is only fair or poor, and about 3/4 believe that media often fail to distinguish well-founded scientific findings from more speculative claims. That is gonna cause one problem. When we don't lift up real thinkers, we teach children that value equals fame, money, or stock value, instead of innovation, curiosity, or service. On the other hand, when we celebrate celebrity scientists, they become the powerful intellectual role model of our society. By putting them front and center, we give our kids a moral compass that is deep, rational, and humane. Our role models then reflect not just what is popular in the society, but also what we collectively hope the society could be. Now let's talk about the soil itself, the education system. This is the ground in which the collective mind of a society takes root. The goals and structure of a school don't just determine what the students learn. They deeply shape how they think, what they value, and how they engage with the world. Take Finland, for example. In the PISA 2022 Creative Thinking Test, 39% of Finnish 15-year-old students reached level 5 or level 6, significantly above the average 27% in OECD. Moreover, 83% of Finnish students achieved at least a baseline level of creative problem solving proficiency in that test, compared to the OECD average of 78%. What makes this possible is how their schools are run. According to the Finnish Education Center, the system relies very little on standardized tests, places strong trust in teacher autonomy, and emphasizes quality teaching and equity. This means students in Finland are not just trained to pass exams. They are nurtured to think, to explore, and to collaborate. Now think about the contrast systems, like the one in China or Korea. In those places, grades basically determine your whole path. It becomes your destiny. Students compete harder and harder for the same tiny rewards, what researchers call involution. They spend all their time fighting for scores instead of building deeper and more meaningful skills to handle the real-world problems. Under such high pressure, a lot of kids basically become the slave of scores. To raise what we might call a complete citizen, the entire ecosystem need to work together: family, school, community, and government, and maybe a sense of moral or spiritual grounding. When these forces work together, they give children steady guidance. And if the education system is built on trust, curiosity, humanity, and responsibility, children will grow up with a clear mind and a strong inner compass. They are not just prepared for exams, but prepared for life. Community is the place where public reason begins to thrive. It is the space between your private life and the larger society. In the Youth Helping American report, over 90% of young people aged 16 and above who took part in a full semester of service learning said they would be willing to spend a year doing national or community service. Among those who never joined such programs, only 75% felt the same. That shows the community projects where young people actively serve help them internalize public responsibility, not just as some one-off projects, but become part of their identity and future civic life. On the individual level, there are also concrete health and social benefits. A recent German network opening study covering over 51,000 children and adolescents found that students who volunteer in school, community, or religious organizations have significantly better well-being. They were more likely to flourish, report excellent health, and exhibit fewer behavioral problems. When young people take part in real community initiatives, they learn to negotiate interests, find common ground, and advocate for something larger than themselves. Now let's talk about government, the part of society that is supposed to keep things fair and make sure opportunity is not a luxury item. Here is the thing: educational equity is not a feel-good slogan. It is one of the signs that clearly shows how mature a society is, and the numbers back this up. According to OECD's PISA 2022 data, students from the wealthiest quarters of family score 90 points higher in reading than students from the poorest area, roughly the equivalent of 3 years of learning. This gap was not created by the children, it is created by the system. And the countries that take equity seriously actually show it in their outcomes. Finland and Canada, for example, constantly rank among the places where students' socioeconomic background explains the least variation in performance. In other words, where you were born matters less when public system holds the line. But fairness is just the starting point. Governments have to build the future. The markets will not do that for us. Private companies rarely invest in long-term basics, like fundamental science, humanities, mental health, or arts. Mental health is another good example. WHO estimates that every $1 spent on common mental health conditions returns $4 in better health and productivity. Yet most governments spend under 2% of their health budget on mental health. Building the future is not just about money, it is also about creating the framework where schools, families, communities, and the civil society groups can actually work together instead of operating in different worlds. Countries with stronger government-community partnerships, like those in the Nordic countries, constantly report higher youth well-being, stronger civic engagement, and greater public trust. So yes, a fair starting point and a long runway. These are the things governments should secure. One guarantees the present, the other makes the future possible. Right now, humanity is stepping into a new chapter where we are living with artificial intelligence, not just using it. AI has become an inseparable part of our daily life. And because of that, the mission of education has to shift, fast and with real intention. Because machines are now capable of doing more than ever before, they are taking up a large proportion of routine, repeatable jobs. According to a 2023 McKinsey report, up to 30% of hours worked in the US could be automated by 2030 due to AI. At the same time, demand for social and emotional skills, things like empathy, leadership, and communication, is projected to grow dramatically. So instead of training kids for jobs that machines already do more efficiently, we need to focus on the abilities and unique human qualities that AI cannot replicate. These abilities include critical thinking. It is the ability to question the data, probe the design of algorithms, and expose hidden assumptions baked into systems. Creativity, the spark that reframes a problem, invents a new question, or imagines something unexpected. In fact, the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report 2023 found that 73% of companies surveyed expect creative thinking to increase in importance in the coming years. Empathy, the emotional intelligence that connects us, that grounds justice, and that gives meaning to our relationships. Ethical judgment, a moral compass strong enough to guide how we build and use technology, so we control the tools instead of letting them control us. Here is the paradox. As more of our life moves into screen, simulations, and virtual spaces, children cannot grow weightless in the cloud. This is why embodied experience has returned to the center of modern education. Nature-based learning is rising worldwide, not as nostalgia, but as necessity. The simple acts, touching soil, watching a sea break open, recognizing the rhythm of living systems, rebuild a child's sense of belonging to the earth. In that groundedness, empathy is born. The journey to complete citizen isn't a government mandate, it is a societal evolution. It requires every one of us in the society to honestly assess the climate and soil we are providing for our children. Are we cultivating subjects to be managed, or co-authors of the society? Are we fostering fear and obedience, or freedom and conscience? The answer will determine the destiny of our civilization. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please comment below if you have any questions or ideas to share, and make sure you subscribe.